year was 1984. Clothing was bright, hair was big, and blockbuster movies were exploding. Model 84 captures the legendary polyphonic synthesizer that dominated the stage in the studio, defined the sound of new genres, and to this day holds an iconic status. Let's start by listening to our opening bass line, which is based on one of the factory presets. Since this is a monophonic line, we can switch from a poly mode to unison, which assigns all 6 voices to one note. And by using the side panel, you could adjust the unison spread or detuning. You can have the voices run freely or synced. When synced, this gives a little boost to the attack. Now, adjust your glide to add some portamento and have the notes glide from one to the other. We can add 2 different variations of an amazingly fat and dirty chorus. The 2 types determine the speed of modulation, with the second being the faster. In the side panel, the mono stereo switch simulates whether we have 2 cables coming out of the back of the hardware or just one. Since this is a bass, I'm going to keep it mono. Now, let's adjust the attack of the ADSR so that the filter opens a little with each new note. Starting with a preset and making some adjustments gets you an amazing sound right away. Let's take a look at another bass part. First, let's open up the filter frequency all the way so we hear the raw sounds of each source. Let's also bring down our sub slider for now. There are essentially 4 main sources: the pulse wave and saw wave of the DCO, the square sub-oscillator, and the noise. Let's start with the saw wave. We could set our octave, or range. If we select the pulse wave, we can manually control its shape. We can also have the LFO modify the width of the pulse. The LFO can also modify the pitch of the DCO, which creates a vibrato. The rate of the LFO then determines the speed of the vibrato. And the delay slider determines whether the LFO starts instantly or gradually happens after a certain period of time after the start of the note. In our DCO, we also have the ability to turn on both waves at the same time, or even add a square sub-oscillator, or noise. Noise is great for creating percussive sounds. Now that we understand our source, let's look at our filter. Let's start by turning down the 3 sliders to the right, and then we'll adjust our cutoff frequency. Let's add a little bit of resonance. Notice as we add even more resonance, we hear the filter sing even more. Now let's explore the 3 sliders on the right side of the low-pass filter. But first, let's take our VCA, and instead of having it modified by an envelope, let's flip the switch to have it controlled by a gate. Now we dedicated the envelope slider to modify the filter cutoff frequency. We can also reverse the polarity of the filter. The LFO can also modify the filter. And on the 3rd slider, we can adjust how much keyboard tracking we would like to have. Tracking effects have the synth filter's notes in the higher register. Adding more resonance pronounces the effect of the keyboard tracking to the cutoff frequency. For this next example, let's go up into the settings and hide the keyboard. Jumping down into the voicing section, We get 3 variations that are accurately modeled and completely change how we perform on this instrument. Poly 1 works great for long sustaining notes and pads where you want the entire release of the envelope. In Poly 2, a new note is only assigned when the previously performed note is still being played. On a monophonic part, this can interrupt the release of the previous note. We've already seen how unison assigns all 6 voices to one note, and it can make a unison line sound aggressive and gigantic. You can really hear in this example that flipping up to sync helps to exaggerate the attack. The Poly mode selection can have a dramatic difference when using glide. In Poly 1, you can hear the voices sliding quite a bit, since each new chord allocates new voices. In Poly 2, you have a result that is more predictable since the voices will be assigned in a more consistent manner. One last thing to mention is our EQ. There's a bass boost at 0, it's flat at 1, and 2 and 3 feature a low cut. Let's add some chorus. Bring in our synthwave pad, and add a few more instruments. And for those of you looking to take everything even further, the DCO and LPF can be controlled by the pitch wheel. The mod wheel can control vibrato. The aftertouch and velocity controls provide opportunities for performers to take their expression beyond the limits of the original hardware. And on top of this, the flexibility to use Model 84's chorus and amp room, and use Model 84 as 7 different modules within Softube Modular, open up even more inspirational opportunities. With Softube's Model 84 Polyphonic Synthesizer, you have the ability to perform with proper voice allocation, the bass boost of the EQ, original factory presets, and the famous chorus that's known for its dirty and fat stereo sound when pushed. Softube modeled this synthesizer down to each detail to give you a faithful emulation of the sound quality of the original hardware that will bring you back to the 1980s.